You want the fit between the two pieces to be tight enough so that they hold together, but still sloppy enough so there's still plenty of room for the metal to flow inside the joint. The strength of the joint comes from molten metal flowing into the joint and filling all the crevices. So you really don't want a perfectly machined joint. Rather than brazing rod, I've always used just plain copper wire. I think the tensile strengths are fairly similar, and certainly copper is a lot easier to get a hold of and a lot easier to work with than brazing rod. I certainly have had no trouble with anything I've ever brazed with copper. As you can see, unlike conventional brazing with an oxyacetylene torch, the filler rod is wrapped around the joint and the whole unit is placed in the fire. The flux is applied just as soon as the metal is hot enough to melt it. Once again, we're using 20 mule team borax as the flux. The flux coats the metal and prevents it from oxidizing. As well, it helps to lower the melting temperature of the copper. When the copper melts and becomes liquid, it flows underneath the flux and bonds to the clean metal of the joint. For that reason, it's very important that the entire joint be brought up to temperature very slowly. You want a good, even heat right through the entire piece. You actually want the steel to melt the copper, not the heat of the fire. If you let the piece heat up too quickly, the copper will melt and simply flow on the surface. It won't be sucked into the joint. So even though the fire looks white hot, I'm keeping it just under the melting temperature of the copper. As you can see here, the copper is just about ready to melt. I'm getting the piece to a yellow heat, but you can still make out the faint line of the copper wire, which still hasn't melted. Unfortunately, the heat of the fire is making it impossible for me to get a clear shot of this, but when the copper is just about ready to go, it has a really iridescent look to it, and then all of a sudden it just disappears off the surface and flows all over the place. That's when you'll see me move the piece from side to side to try to get the metal to flow evenly through the whole joint.